Stop for a moment. Don't scroll. Because what you are about to hear is not motivation. It is confirmation. There was a young woman named Josephine Bakita. She was kidnapped as a child, sold into slavery, beaten, renamed, stripped of dignity. Men marked her body with blades so she would never forget she was owned. They meant it for harm. They meant to erase her identity, silence her future, crush her spirit before it ever bloomed. But history did not remember her captors' names. Heaven remembered hers. That enslaved girl later became free, then became a nun, and today she is honored as Saint Josephine Bakita. What they carved into her skin became the markings of a crown in eternity. Why am I reminding you of her? Because what they meant for harm in your life is not ending in shame. It is forming authority. Before you go any further, take a breath. If this message feels like it's speaking directly into your private battles, softly like this video and subscribe. Not for numbers. But because when you stay connected to words that strengthen your spirit, you stop agreeing with voices that weaken it. Now listen carefully. You thought the betrayal was proof that you were foolish. You thought the rejection meant you were unwanted. You thought the closed door meant you were unqualified. But what if the very thing that embarrassed you is positioning you? What if the tears you cried in secret are preparing you to speak with weight? What if the pain is not punishment, but preparation? In Scripture, Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. Thrown into a pit. Sold. Falsely accused. Imprisoned. Every chapter of his story looked like demotion. Every headline screamed failure. Yet later he would stand in a palace and say, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." The pit was not the end. It was training ground for a throne. You, chosen one, are misreading your own story. You saw abandonment. Heaven saw separation from what would have limited you. You saw humiliation. Heaven saw refinement. You saw loss. Heaven saw transfer. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Because the crown forming over your life is not made of comfort. It is made of endurance. Authority in the Spirit is born from surviving what should have destroyed you. That friend who exposed you. That relationship that collapsed. That opportunity that slipped through your fingers. They were not strong enough to carry the level you are called to. Jesus himself was betrayed with a kiss. Think about that. Betrayal did not come from an enemy at a distance. It came from someone close enough to touch his face. And yet the cross, humanity's cruelest intention, became the symbol of eternal authority. The weapon they used became the throne he reigns from. Do you see the pattern? Betrayal is not canceling you. It is crowning you. But here is the tension you are feeling right now. It doesn't look like a crown. It feels like isolation. It feels like misunderstanding. It feels like being the only one in the room who carries weight nobody acknowledges. Especially as a woman, you were taught to shrink your voice, soften your power, apologize for your strength. And when they felt intimidated, they labeled you difficult. Emotional. Too much. What they called too much is actually capacity. What they called dramatic is actually discernment. What they called intense is actually leadership waiting for alignment. The enemy's strategy was simple: wound her deeply enough that she doubts herself permanently. If she doubts herself, she will never step into authority. If she questions her worth, she will settle for less than her calling. If she believes the betrayal defines her, she will never recognize the crown forming because of it. But something is shifting. The pain that once made you cry now makes you wiser. The silence that once felt lonely now feels strategic. The rejection that once crushed you now clarifies you. You are not reacting the way you used to. You are not chasing the way you used to. You are not begging for spaces that cannot recognize you. That is authority forming. Authority does not shout. It stands. And here is the part most people will never understand about you: you were never meant to be common. That is why common treatment hurt you so deeply. Your spirit always knew you were carrying something sacred. So when they mishandled you, it cut deeper than surface emotion. It touched purpose. But the mishandling did not destroy the anointing. It purified it. Look back carefully. The season that nearly broke you is the season that taught you discernment. The betrayal that shattered your trust is the betrayal that sharpened your boundaries. The loss that emptied you is the loss that forced you to depend on God in a way comfort never could. And now, without announcing it, you are different. Stronger. Quieter. More precise. The crown is not loud gold. It is invisible weight. And the ones who meant you harm, they are about to witness the authority they accidentally built. But there is something you must understand before this transformation completes. There is one internal battle still trying to delay your elevation. And if you don't recognize it, you could sabotage what heaven is finalizing. Do you know what it is? If you are ready, tell me to continue. That internal battle is not your enemies. It is your agreement with what they said about you. Read that again slowly. The betrayal did not have power by itself. The rejection did not define you by itself. The harm was real, yes. The tears were real. The nights you questioned everything were real. But what threatens your crown now is not what they did. It's the narrative you quietly accepted afterward. Somewhere along the way, you started saying, maybe I was too much. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Maybe if I were easier to love, they wouldn't have left. And that whisper became a belief. Chosen one, authority cannot sit on a head that is bowed in false guilt. Joseph could not rule Egypt if he still believed he deserved the pit. Esther could not approach the king if she still believed she was just an orphan. Ruth could not step into royalty if she kept identifying only as the widow from Moab. Your crown requires a shift in identity. And this is why the pain was allowed to go deep. Not to break you, but to confront you. To force you to see what still lived inside your thinking. Because God does not elevate insecurity. He heals it, then He elevates strength. You survived the betrayal. Now you must survive the memory of it without letting it define you. There are women listening right now who built their entire personality around being the strong one, because nobody showed up when they needed support. You learned to carry everything alone. You became independent not because you wanted to, but because you had to. And while that resilience is powerful, it also became armor. Here is the question you have been avoiding: are you strong, or are you guarded? Authority is not built on emotional walls. It is built on healed wisdom. Jesus did not resurrect bitter. He resurrected powerful. The same people who doubted him saw him again, not angry, not defensive, but carrying scars that no longer bled. That is the level you are stepping into. Scars without bleeding. Memory without bondage. And this is where transformation becomes visible. You used to react instantly. Now you observe. You used to over-explain. Now you speak once. You used to chase closure. Now you choose peace. That is not coldness. That is authority stabilizing. The harm was meant to make you collapse emotionally so you would distrust your own judgment forever. But instead, it sharpened your discernment. You can read energy faster now. You notice red flags earlier. You no longer ignore intuition just to keep the peace. That is not trauma talking. That is wisdom forming. But here is the subtle trap: if you remain in survival mode, you will miss your season of positioning. Survival mode makes you defensive. Positioning requires confidence. Survival mode says, protect yourself at all costs. Positioning says, stand where you belong. And you belong higher than you think. There are rooms you will walk into where your presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Not because you are loud. Not because you demand attention. But because suffering refined you into someone who carries weight. Pain gave your words gravity. Tears gave your prayers depth. Isolation gave your thoughts clarity. You are not fragile anymore. You are forged. But elevation always demands one final surrender: the need to prove yourself. Listen carefully. This is where many chosen ones delay their crown. They feel the shift. They sense the authority. And suddenly they want everyone who hurt them to see it. To notice it. To regret what they did. But a crown is not validated by applause. Joseph did not send letters to his brothers saying, "Look at me now." Jesus did not descend from the cross to argue. Esther did not hold a press conference to prove her worth. Their authority spoke for itself. Your elevation will be quiet, but undeniable. And here is the part that should make your spirit sit up: the same betrayal that wounded you is about to become the evidence that qualifies you. Because you now understand pain from the inside. You can lead women who feel discarded because you felt it. You can counsel someone through heartbreak because you survived it. You can stand firm in chaos because you've walked through worse privately. The harm became empathy. The rejection became discernment. The isolation became depth. This is not accidental. Heaven wastes nothing. But there is still something unfolding that you cannot see yet. A door is aligning, not because you chased it, but because you survived what tried to disqualify you. And when it opens, you will realize why certain people had to exit first. The betrayal cleared the room. And what is about to enter requires space. If you can feel that shift already happening around you, in your relationships, in your thinking, in your standards, then you are closer than you realize. But the next phase will test something deeper than your strength. It will test your obedience. And what you choose in that moment will determine how the crown rests on you. Are you ready to hear what that test looks like? The test will not look dramatic. There will be no thunder. No public announcement. No obvious sign that heaven is watching closely. It will look ordinary. It will look like an opportunity to respond the old way. That message that triggers you. That person who underestimates you again. That situation that feels unfair, again. And in that moment, you will feel two versions of yourself rise up. The old you will want to defend, explain, prove, expose. The healed you will feel a quiet restraint. This is the obedience test. Because authority is not proven by how powerfully you react. It is proven by how peacefully you stand. When Jesus was accused falsely, he did not scramble to defend every lie. He answered when necessary. He remained silent when wisdom required it. That silence was not weakness. It was control. And control is a form of authority many never master. You are entering a season where your restraint will speak louder than your reaction. But let's be honest, that is hard. Especially after betrayal. Especially after being misunderstood. Especially after carrying pain alone. There is a part of you that wants vindication. You want the truth exposed. You want the narrative corrected. You want the ones who hurt you to feel even a fraction of what you felt. And that desire makes sense. But here is what heaven is teaching you: vindication is not your assignment. Positioning is. When Joseph stood before his brothers years later, he had the power to humiliate them. He had the authority to retaliate. Instead, he chose alignment with a bigger purpose. That choice confirmed he was ready for the crown. Your test will be similar. You will have the chance to speak. But you will choose wisdom. You will have the chance to embarrass, but you will choose grace. You will have the chance to chase, but you will choose stillness. And in choosing differently, you will feel something unfamiliar. Peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on circumstances, but the steady peace that comes from knowing you are no longer controlled by wounds. That is when betrayal fully transforms into authority. There are women listening who have been in silent battles for years. Smiling publicly. Crying privately. Holding families together. Leading in spaces where their contributions are rarely acknowledged. You have been strong for so long that people assume you don't need support. But God saw every unseen sacrifice. And what feels like delay is actually development. You were being built in private so you could stand in public without crumbling. Here is what is shifting now: you are no longer desperate for validation. You are no longer begging to be chosen. You understand something deeply: if you have to convince someone of your value, they are not assigned to your destiny. That realization alone is authority. And you didn't learn it in comfort. You learned it through heartbreak. Through nights where you questioned your worth. Through friendships that ended without closure. Through prayers that seemed unanswered. But those prayers were not ignored. They were shaping you. Because a crown is heavy. And heaven will never place weight on someone who has not developed the neck to carry it. You have developed strength you didn't know you were building. The reason certain doors closed was not rejection, it was protection. The reason certain relationships collapsed was not punishment, it was redirection. The reason certain betrayals were exposed was not to shame you, it was to free you. Freedom is required before authority. And here is something you may not have considered: some of the people who hurt you were never meant to understand you. Their misunderstanding was part of your separation. If they had fully supported you, you might have stayed smaller to keep them comfortable. But you were not created to stay small. You were created to influence. To lead. To speak with weight. And leadership is lonely before it is recognized. Jesus often withdrew alone before major moments. Isolation was not abandonment. It was preparation. The same is true for you. The season where you felt unseen was the season your foundation was being reinforced. Now you are stepping into visibility, but with maturity. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove it. It will show. In your boundaries. In your tone. In your standards. In the way you no longer tolerate what once drained you. And when the opportunity arrives, the one that feels aligned, elevated, undeniably different. You will not step into it insecure. You will step into it steady. But before that door opens fully, there is one more layer that must be surrendered. One more attachment that could quietly limit how high you rise. It is subtle. It feels harmless. But it has delayed many chosen ones before you. And if you recognize it early, you will move into your position faster than you imagine. Do you want to know what it is? That final layer is this: the attachment to who you used to be. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. Not even the people. The identity. Sometimes you don't cling to wounds, you cling to the version of yourself that survived them. You got used to being the overlooked one. The misunderstood one. The one who gives more than she receives. The one who stays quiet to keep peace. And without realizing it, that identity became comfortable. It gave you something predictable. It explained your disappointments. It justified your caution. It made sense of your solitude. But you cannot wear survival clothes into a season of authority. David could not fight Goliath in Saul's armor. It didn't fit his calling. And the identity that once protected you will not fit the position you are entering. This is the surrender. Letting go of the wounded strong woman narrative. Because you are no longer just surviving. You are stepping into influence. And influence requires visibility. You cannot keep shrinking your voice and expect the crown to rest fully. You cannot keep minimizing your gifts and expect elevation to feel natural. You cannot keep preparing for loss while praying for expansion. The shift happening now is internal before it becomes external. You are being invited to see yourself differently. Not as someone who was almost broken, but as someone who was built. There is a reason your spirit feels restless lately. A reason certain environments feel tight. A reason conversations that once satisfied you now feel shallow. You are outgrowing spaces that were designed for your healing, not your reigning. And growth feels uncomfortable when you have been humble for so long. Especially as a woman of faith. You were taught to be gentle. To be patient. To be giving. And those qualities are beautiful. But humility does not mean invisibility. Gentleness does not mean silence. Patience does not mean settling. Jesus was gentle and authoritative. Compassionate and commanding. Loving and clear. You are allowed to carry both softness and strength. In fact, that balance is your distinction. But here is the subtle attachment you must release. The need to be understood by everyone. Authority is often misunderstood before it is respected. When Esther stepped into her position, not everyone celebrated immediately. When Deborah led, not everyone agreed instantly. When Mary carried what was divine, people questioned her character. Yet their assignment was not dependent on public approval. And neither is yours. Some of the discomfort you feel right now is not attack, it is transition. You are transitioning from tolerated to respected. From available to selective. From proving to positioned. And that shift will require you to disappoint people who benefited from your old boundaries. They were comfortable when you overextended. They were comfortable when you overexplained. They were comfortable when you accepted crumbs. But elevation changes appetite. You no longer crave what once felt necessary. And that scares people who expected you to remain accessible. But listen carefully, you are not becoming arrogant. You are becoming aligned. There is a difference. Arrogance says, I am better. Alignment says, I know who I am. And knowing who you are is not pride. It is clarity. Clarity is what betrayal forced you to develop. You had to ask hard questions. You had to evaluate patterns. You had to confront where you ignored red flags. That self-awareness is not shameful. It is powerful. Because now when the next opportunity comes, the partnership, the platform, the relationship, the leadership space, you will not enter it desperate. You will enter it discerning. And discernment is a crown jewel. But here is what you must prepare for: when your position becomes visible, some of the very people who doubted you will attempt to reconnect. Not because they changed, but because they see the shift. And this is where many chosen ones stumble. They feel compassion, nostalgia, a desire to prove there is no bitterness. And they reopen doors that were closed for a reason. You must remember, forgiveness does not always require access. Jesus forgave, but he did not entrust himself to everyone. Wisdom will guard your elevation. And elevation is closer than you think. There is a convergence happening. Conversations aligning. Opportunities forming. People being positioned who will recognize what others mishandled. The harm did not destroy your destiny. It cleared the path for it. And in this next movement, you will see evidence, tangible, undeniable evidence, that what broke you publicly was building you privately. But when that moment arrives, when the crown is no longer just spiritual but visible, will you be ready to wear it without shrinking? Because the final confirmation is coming. And it will change how you see everything that happened before. The confirmation will not arrive as noise. It will arrive as alignment. One day soon, something will happen that makes you pause. A call. An invitation. A recognition. An opportunity that feels different from all the others. It will not feel rushed. It will not feel forced. It will feel right. And in that moment, you will realize something that almost brings you to tears. If the betrayal had not happened, you would not be ready for this. If the rejection had not refined you, you would have mishandled this. If the delay had not stretched you, you would have settled beneath this. What they meant for harm will suddenly look like strategic positioning. You will see how the wrong relationship taught you standards for the right one. How the job that dismissed you sharpened skills for the role that values you. How the season of obscurity built character for the season of visibility. Nothing was wasted. Heaven does not improvise. It orchestrates. Joseph could not interpret dreams in the palace if he had not practiced faithfulness in prison. Esther could not save a nation if she had not first survived obscurity. Jesus could not carry resurrection authority without first enduring the cross. And you could not carry what is coming if you had not endured what tried to crush you. There is a reason your endurance did not break. There were nights you thought you were at your limit. Mornings you woke up tired of being strong. Moments you questioned whether obedience was even worth it. But you did not quit. And that is why the crown fits. Because it was measured through suffering. Now listen closely. Authority is not just about position. It is about responsibility. When you step into what is forming, people will look to you differently. Not because you demanded it, but because your survival carries credibility. You will speak, and it will carry weight. You will lead, and it will carry influence. You will decide, and it will carry impact. And the woman who once doubted herself will barely recognize how steady she feels. This is the transformation. Not loud. Not flashy. But undeniable. The same mouth that once cried in prayer will now counsel others with confidence. The same heart that once broke in silence will now discern what others cannot see. The same hands that once trembled will now build something lasting. Pain became position. Betrayal became authority. Isolation became intimacy with God. You were not abandoned. You were apprenticed. And here is the moment that will make you whisper, "Wow," under your breath. The people who meant to harm you may never fully understand what they triggered. They thought they were ending you. They were introducing you to your next dimension. They thought they were disqualifying you. They were accelerating you. Their intention does not override divine design. You do not need revenge. You do not need explanation. You do not need applause. Your life will preach what your mouth never had to defend. And when you stand in that new space, steady, grounded, elevated, you will not feel arrogance. You will feel gratitude. Because you will remember the girl who cried on the floor asking God why. You will remember the version of you who almost gave up. You will remember the nights where silence felt deafening. And you will realize, he was building a crown in the dark. If this message has been speaking directly to your spirit, stay connected. Stay planted in spaces that remind you who you are becoming. Quietly support, quietly grow, quietly align. Because consistency in truth keeps your crown steady. Now hear this final truth. You are not rising to prove them wrong. You are rising because it was written. Before the betrayal. Before the heartbreak. Before the disappointment. Your authority was already assigned. The harm was only a tool. And as you move forward from this moment, do not look back with resentment. Look back with revelation. That pit had purpose. That cross had power. That rejection had redirection. And the crown? It was forming the entire time. Walk like it. Speak like it. Choose like it. Because the next time someone underestimates you, it will not wound you. It will remind you. Chosen one, what they meant for harm has become your crown. And this is only the beginning.